What's up everybody, Alex here in Warsaw, sitting in a park. Got a question through from Kiz1988, appreciate you for sending through your question. If any of you other guys want to send through suggestions, prompts, questions, do so in the comments below or DM me, email me, and make sure that before we go into this discussion, you are subscribed, you are following me for more insights and ideas and topics around motivation, mental health, productivity, confidence, self-development, that kind of stuff. I'm your man for that. Today's question was, how do we bounce back after failing? What is the bounce back process after failure? How do we deal with failure? Now, as I like to always do things, I like to not plan too much before I do these videos. So I want to see what comes up automatically. The idea coming to mind at the moment is that there are two ways that people tend to respond to failure. One way is the amateur way, the victim mentality way, shall we say, or at least having flashes of victim mentality within one's response to a failure. And then there's the owner mentality, the positive, creative, I suppose non-judgmental way to respond to failure. Now, what is failure? That's the question. Obviously, if you have failed, or if you've considered yourself to have failed, you have put a judgment on yourself in that regard. You have called something that you've done, some behavior you've done, some event that took place, you are labeling it as a failure. So that's one thing to bear in mind, and I would say that that's the kind of thing that a victim tends to do. And now that I say victim, it sounds pretty strong. Especially given the fact that most of us as humans, as people who have emotions and want to do the best for themselves and want to live good lives without stepping on other people, that kind of stuff, we tend to judge ourselves a lot, and we tend to call things failures because we have high standards for ourselves, and that's understandable. But if we were to respond using an ownership mentality, using a creative approach, we wouldn't see what we did as failure at all. We would find a way to interpret whatever happened in a way that is empowering, in a way that is going to help us. And in that sense, we are theoretically able to move through all aspects of life without ever truly failing, because everything that happens to us we can either view as a win or a fail, or we could see it all as information coming through to us from the stimuli of reality. We can see stuff that happens to us, stuff that we do to other people, events that happen in our world. We can see all of it as simply label-free data coming through our senses. It is up to us then to judge whatever it is that we judge as a failure or not. We can judge something as a success, or we could judge something as a failure. And I'm sure you can think of examples of you identifying something as a mistake or a failure. It could be that you spilled some paint on the floor. This is the first idea coming to mind. You view that thing as a failure, but someone else in the room might look at it and laugh and call it a great success, and want to put a frame around the spill and call it modern art. There is no failure. And as hard as it might be, especially if you're in the habit, if you're in the if you've been getting used to calling things failures when really they aren't, when really they can be interpreted in any way that we like, then it's going to be a little bit tougher perhaps in the early stages to get back into that habit, to get back to seeing things and interpreting things in a positive way. And when we can get to that point, what's there to bounce back from? If there is no failure, right, there is no spoon, in the words of the Matrix. How can we have something to flinch from? How can we bounce back from something that never happened. So that's really the approach through the eyes, through the mindset, through the soul of an owner, of someone who goes through life and is creative, is purely creative every step of the way. Every thing that happens in this person's reality is an opportunity to create, an opportunity to see opportunity, and it's an opportunity to learn something. Whereas the victim, or shall we just say the average Joe, or even 95% of humans, will see something that they construe as a failure, and when you label something that's a failure, you're effectively kind of admitting defeat to what's happened to you in reality, rather than saying, this is interesting, how can I learn from this, right? So that's really how you would best move through something that you might previously have called a failure, that you now realize is simply data that you can learn from, or you can just let slide, you can not let it affect you. So just be aware of the subtle difference between seeing failure as a positive or seeing failure as data, labelless data that doesn't matter either way. You can see something as really positive, or you can just leave it. Or seeing it as a big deal, which so many people do for so many things. We see something that we did that we don't like, and we see it as a big deal. We take it seriously and we take it personally, and we make it about us, and we make it about our own egos. And of course we suffer because we have made whatever happened, whatever we did, we have made it personal. We have failed to see a way to learn from that thing, and we resist it. And that's where the suffering is. We resist something that happened. We don't like the way it was. We wish we could rewind time and say, dang it, I wish I could just do that again better. And that's always going to cause pain, because you can't change the past. And yeah, you can't rewind. So if you're trying to change something that is the way it is, you're always going to be in pain. You're going to experience the pain that comes out of trying to bring two things together that just don't belong together, i.e. rewinding time and the past. So I hope that makes sense to some of you who might have been going through some suffering recently, and we're labeling it as failure on our behalf, on our, through our own actions. We're calling something that we did was a failure. Everything can be interpreted as a success, and nothing needs to cause us suffering. Absolutely nothing. Because ultimately suffering comes from the conjuring of a sense of self in our own thinking that is being vulnerable, that is being made vulnerable to what's happening in one's environment. Am I talking sense? Probably not. Suffering is only rooted in interpretation and thought. So if we suffer, it's because there's a sense of self that is being attacked. Our egos are being attacked. We're feeling humiliated, we're feeling ashamed. But that can only happen if we think that there's such a thing as self, and there isn't a self. This is where it gets a little bit kooky and a bit weird, but it's true. There is no self to be attacked. There is no fragile ego to be protected. There is no identity to create a sense of longing in you for things to be different. So we're kind of moving up a level here in a sense of like kind of consciousness. Like we're moving out of like the material plane, and we're now moving into a more of a spiritual plane. But that's where the magic really happens, is when we can really understand how there is no self. In the words of the Buddha, there is no self. And when we believe that there's something to protect, when we believe that there is something, that there is an us, there is an ego that needs protecting and needs to feel as though we need to right the wrong of failure, we're going to be feeling the pain of that. So to rewind and put things a little bit more simply, perhaps, if you experience something in your life that you don't like, that you are tempted to call failure, you have two options really. If you're taking the kind of winner mentality, the enlightened mentality, you have two options. You have the option of letting it go entirely, because the only pain is going to be associated with your thinking of what happened. So why bother? There's nothing good that comes out of pining over how things were in the past. There's just nothing. There's nothing sensical about spending your time thinking about how things were, because you're going to be out of the present. You're going to be unconscious, and that's where potentially more stumbling is going to happen. If you're not present with what's happening right now, you're going to stumble because you're not present, because you're thinking about, oh, I wish I didn't screw up. So let it go. Let it go entirely. Get back to presence. And it'll certainly help to realize that the thing that happened wasn't a failure anyway, because you can learn from every failure. You can learn from every mistake. You can learn from every event, because it's all data. So let it go, first choice, or see how that thing has taught you something. And you might want to sit down with a pen and paper, like I sometimes do, and you could probably see this as kind of middle ground between victim and owner, is sit down and reinterpret, reframe what happened, and ask yourself the question, how can what happened, that thing that I don't really like, that thing that caused me to flinch, how can I reframe that in a way that is helpful for me, in a way that is going to teach me something? And that's how to get through and process failure. Hope that helped. If you guys have any questions and you want me to talk on any particular subject, I'm here for you. Do subscribe, do like this, and peace out.